Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange. You're joining us today for another CSE podcast where we break down a new policy at the CSE. The CSE has introduced a specific approval process for redefined major acquisitions that is separate and apart from the process applicable to a fundamental change. Previously, only major acquisitions accompanied by a change of control required formal review and approval by the CSE. What we've observed are transactions involving substantial assets, sometimes over 50% of an issuer's assets, or expected to represent more than 50% of an issuer's assets, or management time in the next 12 months, that lack the comprehensive review and disclosure investors need for accurate valuation. Since these transactions don't trigger the existing review process, this could potentially lead to incomplete or limited disclosure about the assets involved. The goal of these amendments is clear: to encourage greater disclosure to the public, ensuring investors have relevant and reliable information about material acquisitions. This aligns with the broader aim at fostering fair, transparent markets. Now, every proposed issuance of shares related to these transactions is captured through forms and press releases, prompting the exchange to assess whether it qualifies as a major acquisition that requires review. The new process considers asset thresholds, revenue, and activity tests to ensure such transactions are thoroughly scrutinized. As in the past, if a major acquisition involves a change of control, it will be subject to additional review under Policy 8, requiring shareholder and exchange approval for a fundamental change, including an updated listing statement. For both major acquisitions and fundamental changes, management must also provide evidence of the assets' value on request, reinforcing the emphasis on proper valuation and disclosure. Overall, these amendments are a proactive step to improve transparency, support accurate valuation, and uphold market integrity across all sectors, not just mining. This ensures that all significant transactions receive proper oversight, benefiting both investors and issuers and strengthening confidence in our markets. And I'm now joined by JJ Hudolin with DuMoulin Black. JJ, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, JJ, you are an advisor with DuMoulin. Tell us what your role is within the firm.
So, my day-to-day with DuMoulin is really focused on helping listed companies in Canada. A lot of CSE listed companies, TSXV, CBO, TSX, but a lot in the junior space. So CSE listed issuers and TSXV. That's really what DuMoulin Black has a lot of of our client base in that area. So I'm mainly focused on just helping clients get listed and kind of navigate the hurdles associated with that. And after listing, navigate the post-listing world of being a junior public company.
Now, if I'm correct, you have a background working directly with exchanges, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah,
Okay.
Once upon a time, not too long ago, but a few years ago now, I worked with the TSX Venture Exchange, helping companies get listed, and similar thing, get listed and work with policies and find a way to get business done that's policy compliant, really.
Well, I think this is really unique that you guys have this in place at the firm to have someone within the practice that specifically focuses on exchange policies and how we interpret those and how the regulators are approaching those and helping your clients with that. So I think that's commendable of you guys doing that. So obviously today we're here to talk about an amended policy at the CSE. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really important for us to kind of break down these amendments so that the general community can understand them and how it will affect them as a public company going forward. It's also helpful for investors and other stakeholders to understand, this policy will implement more disclosure. So it is a benefit to investors in the end to have more disclosure at their disposal to be able to evaluate if they want to invest in a company, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, JJ, so let's break it down. How are these changes going to affect CSE issuers?
Yeah, so I think in a nutshell, there won't be too much practical impact.
Okay.
But it's good to, have these discussions to kind of simplify things. And that's largely what we, try to do at DuMoulin Black and trying to, practice securities law in a way for these public companies that kind of, gets through these hurdles and helps companies do it in a streamlined fashion. So changes like this, where I don't think there'll be a huge impact on listed issuers, which is probably a good thing. It's just important to know practically, how, what these changes are, so companies know how to move forward. And I think this change for, really kind of breaking up the fundamental change prior definition where you needed to have a major acquisition with a change of control, and now requiring CSE approval for just the major acquisition piece. It's something that issuers need to be aware of,
Yes.
so they could plan appropriately.
Yes.
And kind of know when to reach out to advisors or not.
Yes.
And but in the past, the reality was, I think, where there perhaps wasn't a full fundamental change, you'd have a major acquisition without a change of control. Still those filings would trigger some level of review, where the exchange would, of course, need to
Right.
get involved to ensure that this isn't in fact a
Right.
major acquisition, or this isn't in fact a change of control. So it was really a level of work was being done in any event in the past. I
That's
think
right.
this just kind of clarifies that in these situations, the CSE
It will start a process that is more
Yeah.
formal. So just to clarify a few of those things that you touched on. So firstly, the CSE will review, they see the issuance of shares that will typically occur either in a restructuring of a company or in the acquisition of a company. They'll see this issuance of shares. So that will trigger our compliance department to review what's occurred for this issuance of securities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And in the past, there was a definition of a major acquisition being considered an acquisition alongside a change of control. Is that right?
Yeah.
Now what we've done is we've said, now a major acquisition only requires a major acquisition. The change of control portion doesn't need to be an element to cause us to review it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
To review and to approve it.
Okay.
Before, yeah.
Now, in what circumstance, and maybe you can just touch on why that might have transitioned. So why do we break those two things out?
So I think they're most likely there were a lot of scenarios where companies were completing pretty significant transactions that didn't require prior exchange approval, right? So
Right.
just really any transaction where the company is really going to focus on going forward, focus more than 50% of its assets, resources, management time, expenditures, that type of thing. But there's no change of control.
Right.
So there's no 100% dilution, or there's no 20% control block being created.
Right.
If that wasn't the case in the past, then technically under policy, you wouldn't need pre-approval, CSE pre-approval.
Right.
But and of course, companies could still have pretty significant transactions that were major acquisitions.
Right.
And they're pretty, maybe not necessarily transformative transactions. Maybe they are, maybe they're not.
Right.
But pretty significant transactions that could be filed without requiring pre-approval.
And I think what's important is that the goal isn't necessarily for the CSE to review as much as possible. The goal really is to have enough disclosure to create a proper valuation, right? That's the goal in the end, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's the market, to benefit the market, really, right? And what would, like you said, going back earlier, what would investors, this benefits investors, all stakeholders, not
Yes.
just issuers, not just advisors. It's really largely for investors.
Okay. Now, let's say, for example, you end up doing a major acquisition without the change in control, and you issue the shares. It triggers the review process by our compliance department. Maybe you can break down, because it's not one size fits all with how you're going to hear from our compliance department or what the requirements are going to be. So what's going to happen once that triggers that review process from our compliance department?
Yeah, well, I think in the past, like you said, you'd still need a form filing. So if issuing any securities in a distribution, and even some transactions that didn't have the distribution of securities could require a form filing with the CSE. And then, like you said, the CSE would review and determine what requirements are needed. Now, I think the process, it's still the same process, but now with this clarification in policy, issuers really will be able to, in advance, identify a major acquisition.
Right.
Or at least, I think, be prepared to make that determination and speak to the CSE about it
Right.
when the time comes. So, I would think if an issuer is quite certain that there's a major acquisition here, then it's part of that form filing and the posting of that form for the distribution, the Form 9 that's required. Accompanying that, to give the CSE a heads up that this is likely a major acquisition.
Well, and I think more importantly than giving the CSE a heads up is being prepared that you're going to be asked for disclosure, right?
Yeah.
And there's a variety of disclosure that you might be asked for. It could be financial disclosure. It could be more disclosure on the asset that you're acquiring, right? There's a variety of valuation. Thank you. How you came to your valuation, what metrics were used, those types of things. So at the end of the day, it's not defined what kind of disclosure will be requested, but be prepared that if you are meeting this threshold, that there will be a potential request for more disclosure from the CSE, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And whereas in the past, without this written in policy, I think some issuers and professional advisors and others probably would think that you make the filing, the posting of the notice, and you wait 5 business days, then you close. And perhaps in the past, people were surprised by some of these inquiries.
Right.
But now I think that it'll clarify that process.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we've always tried to maintain at the CSE is transparency in what the process is going to look like.
Yeah.
And so from my understanding, this was in practice before. If there was this kind of transaction occurring, the compliance department would get involved and request various pieces of disclosure. But it's very important that you understand what is going to be asked of you going into the process, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about, this is obviously on all sectors, but I think specifically let's break down how this is going to affect the resource sector because, the basis of the exploration world is to continue to acquire assets or to do work on old assets, acquire new ones. It's kind of a moving target sometimes. So how is this specifically going to affect or not affect exploration companies?
Yeah, I think it's in a market like this, in a bull mining market, it's an important point to flag. And like you said, I totally agree that it's pretty ordinary course of business for a junior exploration company to continue to acquire assets. So I think for a larger mining company, if we're talking about larger in the, in this venture world of listings, but let's say we're talking about like a 100 million to 200 million market cap company and they're making a smaller acquisition, it's probably not going to move the needle that much.
Right.
But if we have a smaller kind of like nano cap type company of say you're a 5 million market cap company and you're looking to ordinary course of business, explore a new property and just move on from a property that you're previously exploring and spent a lot of money on, or just, a good amount of money on in the last, say, 12 months, but now you want to pivot to something new. It's good to be aware of this major acquisition policy because for smaller companies, what is considered a major acquisition, just 50% of assets, resources, planned expenditures, and management time, it could get triggered.
Yes.
So it's important to realize, in the case of if you're distributing securities to acquire that new project to focus on,
right,
that perhaps there will be a bit more disclosure that's required.
That's required.
And, some description of the valuation that was associated there and kind of like we've talked about. So I think for mining companies, especially in a good market where now there's it's great that there's more financing on the table.
Yeah.
And I think it's encouraging companies to explore properties that in other markets probably people wouldn't be spending money in the ground on. So
I mean, the nature of the business is exploration. So if you're on a property, you don't find the results that you're looking for. The markets have shifted. You find a new property that has great prospects as in a heated part of the market. It's all wonderful. Make sure that the new proposed asset maybe has some good disclosure on it, right? And some good reporting on it so that you're able to move forward in a more efficient manner. Okay, so that's mainly mining companies, but this really is for any type of asset. I would assume we'd also see, because I think one thing I wanted to ask you to break down a little bit is that this is not 50% of a market cap of a company. It is 50% of the assets. So can you break that down a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think, a good starting place often is just the balance sheet of the company in the most recent quarter or annual balance sheet, whatever it is. Taking a look at that for any company, mining or otherwise, and just starting with that asset test. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily the determinative factor, the book value of the assets, but looking at that and perhaps considering market value of the assets that you have. But I'd say that's a good starting point with the company's balance sheet, and then also just past expenditures and future expenditures, and really realistically what a company is planning on focusing its management time, efforts, and expenditures on in the next 12 months. So having a realistic look at that, if the company hasn't really done a whole lot on a certain line of business or project in the last 12 to 24 months and is now doing something that is being, marketed and, out being, news released and marketed to the market as a new focus.
Right.
Those are the areas where, on the more, I think, qualitative analysis would perhaps trigger a major acquisition. That management focus time. Yeah.
Right. And again, none of these, triggering a major acquisition isn't stopping you from moving forward. It's just requiring more disclosure than people were providing beforehand in efforts to create better valuation and better disclosure for investors, really, at the end.
Yeah, I think, all stock exchanges have similar requirements, really, as far as I'm aware, where going back to maybe it's a transformative transaction, but if not a transformative transaction, it's pretty significant.
Right.
So there's always, as a public company, requirements that to be aware of. I think this is just kind of clarifying the steps that, and the added disclosure to benefit the market. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I remember correctly, the areas in our policies that you'd want to get more information is 1, where we have our definitions, right?
Yeah.
8.
Yeah. Fundamental changes.
Fundamental changes. And is there a little 6 in there?
Yeah, there's 6. That's good.
Are my bosses watching?
Remember if I could, distributions is in 6. So I think that's largely where this requirement for pre-approval of a major acquisition would be is in that policy 6 on distributions. And then for policy 8, my understanding is that it pretty well remains the same. So that's fundamental changes,
right?
Which is really a new listing review. Those kind of stay the same, where you need a new listing statement, potentially reviewed, audited financial statements, that type of process. That's still
shareholder approval.
Shareholder approval. Yeah.
Okay.
That still is what it is, not unchanged. This is just major acquisitions that aren't fundamental changes.
Right. Okay.
Requiring a little bit more detail and disclosure.
Okay. Perfect. I love it. Okay.
But no listing statement.
Okay, that's great. Now, just if our viewers aren't aware of this, if you go to our website, thecsc.com, all of our policies are right on the website. We have 10 policies. They're pretty easy to read. So maybe go to 1, 6, and 8 if you wanted to get more information. We also have all of our notices and bulletins right on our website that you can review yourself. But JJ, you do share some wonderful insights and some LinkedIn type articles. Where can people get more information from you?
Yeah, and I think, with policy changes like this, I think LinkedIn's a great resource to kind of put things out there.
Yep.
So from time to time, I'll give updates there.
Okay.
And then
so follow JJ on LinkedIn.
And the firm website at DuMoulin Black and has our whole team there. And where I tend to focus on this area for my practice, like the firm generally, we have a lot of lawyers that kind of speak the same language.
Yes.
So that's really like corporate securities, the CSE listed companies, venture listed companies. That's really a lot of our bread and butter. So we have a lot of people on our team that could have these same discussions.
You have a skilled team that knows the venture space well, listing on the CSE, which is wonderful, and we love that. Any final words, JJ, or guidance for issuers as people start entering with this as a formal policy now? An uptick in the market, hopefully a great market coming, especially in the resource sector. Any guidance you want to give?
I think probably don't overcomplicate it.
Okay.
You know, I don't
I
think a
love
lot
that.
has changed. And so, yeah, don't overcomplicate it. I think the purpose of a discussion like this is just to kind of simplify it.
Yes.
So just have a general idea of these changes and perhaps the added disclosure that may be needed, like we've talked about. And yeah, know when to, you know, reach out to professional advisors. But I think just having these discussions to not overcomplicate things helps management teams kind of move forward and not be
Okay.
overly stressed. And yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, JJ. And
Yeah,
I
thanks for
hope that
having
you
me.
come back and join me in the studio because I think this is a great way to break down changes in our policies or trends that we're seeing. So please come back and join us.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you.
Thank you.